So how many folks here have a housing payment of some kind, whether it's a mortgage or rent or something like that? So that's pretty good. So no one's in a tiny house. I didn't see the results of his hand raising. Is that correct? Okay. So with that housing payment, and you guys have your notebooks out now, so go ahead and open to the first page. We're just going to take a couple quick notes here. I promise it's not school. We're not going to do this all the way through. You'll be all right. So there's a simple equation I want you guys to write down. And if you have calculators or if you're a math whiz, you can do the math right now, but if you probably want to wait till you get home to actually do the numbers on this. So if you write down your housing cost per month and then put a line under it, you're going to divide that by your net monthly income, multiply that by 100, and that's going to give you the percentage of your net monthly income that you use to pay just for your housing. So again, you probably want to do this math when you get home, but if you're like most Americans, your number's going to come out somewhere around 27%. Now, maybe a little higher, a little bit lower, but somewhere right in that area. And anyone surprised by that 27% of your net monthly income might go to pay for just your housing? It's kind of a large number, right? So with this 27%, we can also look at how much time we're spending to pay for that housing. So again, we'll do a little math here. I apologize, a little math to get us started, wake everybody up a little bit. With 27% of my income, if I do some simple cross multiplication, everybody remembers algebra, right? I know there's students back in here. You guys remember algebra? One person, that's good. So with our simple cross multiplication, we can learn that at 27% of our income, 27% of our time, that's 10.8 hours out of a 40-hour work week that we're working just to pay for our housing. That doesn't include maintenance or utilities or other costs that add on to the cost of housing, so that could easily end up being closer to 2 out of every 5 days that you're working to pay for your housing. That's a lot of time. So I'm not suggesting that we get rid of housing entirely, right? I'm not saying that you should go buy a tent and go live up in the hills or live out of the back of your car or anything like that. Although I will say there are some pretty cool examples of that, and those of you who checked out the tiny house movement know what I'm talking about. So that's an option if you want to go there, but that's not what we're talking about today. What I'm suggesting is that we have to readdress how we look at housing and stop looking at these giant McMansions and start living in what I call human scale. Okay, so human scale is about having all of our housing needs met, but not strapping ourselves to the work wagon. Okay, somewhere we were told that, a bigger house with lots of square footage, that's going to make us happy. And I would suggest it's actually the exact opposite of that. I think with less square footage, we have more time to find our freedom and create happiness for ourselves. Okay, this is a picture of our house. Clearly not a cramped hallway, right? Now, this house not only meets all of our housing needs, but we're happier in this space than we've been in any house that we've lived in our adult lives. And we've lived in some really nice houses. So the caveat here, we have this American dream of having this beautiful home, right? And we get to this place where we've got the cherry cabinets and the hardwood floors, and all of that's great. And then we start looking at how much time we're spending to pay for that house. And suddenly that American dream starts becoming more of a nightmare. It's not quite as much fun. So you've had a little tour here of the home. You've seen a little bit of the inside. There's our outside. We don't quite get the snow that you guys get, but we get a little bit. So our house cost from start to finish just a little bit over $30,000 to build. So we built it out of cash, out of pocket. And if you compare that with the national average from the National Association of Home Builders, you're looking at $246,000, almost $250,000. So I don't know about you guys, but I'm not carrying that kind of cash in my pocket. I'm not going to walk in, throw that on the table, grab my keys, and say thanks. Right? There's going to be some kind of loan that takes place there. So typically you're looking at a 30-year mortgage. So you can buy that house. I think statistically you end up buying it about 3 times over. So let's raise that cost up a little bit now, maybe $750,000 for that house. The down payment that you're going to have to make, typically you're looking at about a 20% down payment. So just the down payment alone is almost $50,000. So since I know there are some math whizzes up there, but for the rest of us, that means that the difference between just making a down payment and the total cost to build our house, we saved over $16,000. Okay, so anyone have a good idea of what they do with 16 grand stuck in their pocket? It might be all right, yeah? So, assuming that we never move out of our house, it's a big assumption, I know. But we might never move out of our house. We love it. It's super comfortable. We've never felt that it's cramped. We've never felt that we need more space. We have everything that we need in our house. So assuming we never moved from that house, we will never, ever have a housing payment to make again. We're done. All right, so that's, I like the woo. Hey, so don't clap for me. I mean, think about that for yourself. So take a moment to imagine that for yourself. And If you're the kind of person who likes this sort of thing, you can close your eyes, you can take a breath, you can get calm and think about what that would really be like to never have a housing payment again. And what would you do with that extra time, that extra money that frees up? Maybe you travel more or learn another language you've always wanted to learn. Maybe you retire early and just start enjoying life right now. So it doesn't really matter how you paint that picture. What matters is that there's a lot of options that open up. And those options open up when you make one simple change, and that's living within the scale of your humanity. So how did we get here? Does anyone think that we've always been this way, that we've always had huge amounts of foreclosures and tons of debt and all the stress that goes along with that? No, we haven't. It's changed. And since 1973, the U.S. Census Bureau has reported that the size of our houses, on average, has increased over 61%. So I'm going to give a little secret away here. I was born in 1973. So you can do the math again and find out how old I am. But what that means is that in my lifetime, literally in my lifetime, housing has gone up by over 60%, and now it's landed right around, or a little bit over, 2,600 square feet per house. That's a pretty big house. Maybe not here for the Springs. I lived here for a year, and I know that houses are big here. But that's still a big house. What's interesting is in the same time that size of housing has gone up, our household sizes have come down. So that's kind of weird, right? Why are we making these bigger houses, and yet our household sizes is coming down? And that's meant that if you look at the square foot that each person not uses, because I don't think we really use it, but is attributed, that's almost doubled in that same time period. So over 91% increase since 1973. And now each person in a household is allotted 1,000 square feet per person. That's nuts. I don't know how big this room is, but picture 1,000 square feet and say, okay, that's mine, and you can have that 1,000 square feet. It's crazy. It's totally crazy to me. So somehow we were told that bigger is better, when I really think that bigger means you have less time, you're spending more money, and there's more stress involved. So there are lots of costs that come into it. And again, I'm going to go back to the U.S. averages before I get to the cost of, well, I've already spoken about some financial costs. So we'll talk about other costs like time. So let's say you've dedicated 27% of your time, and you're going to go to work, and you're going to do that and come back, and there goes that money. It's gone, right? But you have to get to and from work, and there's often traffic involved, especially here in the Springs. So if you're looking at the average commute, you're looking about an hour. Okay? That's round trip. And each person typically in the U.S. works about an 8.5-hour day, including lunch and breaks. So that means of the 24 hours in a day, you're not even in your house for 9.5 of them. So add in how much we all sleep. How much do you guys think we sleep? Like 5-6 hours a night? It kind of feels like that sometimes. It's actually 9 hours. That's the U.S. average. So if you add up the amount that you're asleep and the amount that you're gone, that means that you're left with about 5.5 hours awake in your house during the day, during the work week. So I personally hope that you're doing a really, really good job with those 5.5 hours and that you're using them really well, right? Because that's expensive. If you amortize the cost of your house over 5.5 hours, that's a lot, right? So one way you can do it is you can come home and spend that time cleaning your house, because you've got this great big house now, and you've got thousands of square feet to vacuum and mop and all that good stuff, maybe do some dishes. My house, if my wife and I team up and we really work hard to get our house, top to bottom, as clean as can possibly be, it takes 15 minutes, half an hour, right? So that's one way you can spend that time. But that's a cost, right? The time that you lose in living in a bigger house. So there's also environmental costs. Obviously, when you build a big house, there's going to be a 250-page materials list, and you're going to be pretty much personally responsible for the financial viability of your local lumber yard, because your house is just going to keep taking all kinds of materials to build. But there's long-term costs too. And those long-term costs come in the form of utility costs. The bigger your house is, the bigger the systems you need to heat and cool that space, right? So you have bigger systems, you have bigger costs financially. You also have bigger costs environmentally. There's an impact of having that much heating and cooling going on throughout the year. And I would ask about how your relationships are doing. I was talking backstage with some folks about relationships and the stress that can happen to relationships, and really make those things hard to bring people together, right? The stress of, I drive down a road and sit in traffic for hours to get to a job that I don't really like, and I'm wearing clothes I don't really dig, and why am I doing this? That stress comes home. The stress, financial stress of can I make my mortgage payment? All these things start to add up. There's another issue with relationships in larger houses, and it's what I consider spatial separation. So anyone ever see a kid get ticked off and he's mad at his parents and he runs down the hallway, slams the door, right? So he's now separated off from the family. Deal with that on your own. Maybe the parent takes their head in and says, hey, everything okay? If you got good parents, that'll happen. And then there's, even in good times, you have one kid playing video games in one room, another kid's, maybe watching TV in another room, you're watching a movie in the other room. There's this spatial separation. And in a tiny house, that's just not really possible. You can create private space, but it's a much more intimate way of living together. And it fosters relationships, whereas I think larger houses actually hinder those close relationships from coming together. So a story I like to tell is my wife and my, at the time, 11-year-old daughter went and lived in Mexico in our pop tent trailer on the beach. It was pretty rough. You can imagine the view was really horrible. And my daughter got really ticked off at me about something. I have no idea what, but she was mad. And so she went into her room. She didn't walk down the hallway because we only had like 11 square feet of hallway. But she got into her little bed there, and she slammed the curtain. The noise isn't quite as good when you slam a curtain. And so I'm sitting here about, an eighth of an inch of fabric separating me and my daughter who's mad. And so we talked about it. We worked our way through it. Clearly, you can't just sit in that kind of space and just fester. It just doesn't happen. So the communication comes through. And that honest and vulnerable communication is so important to relationships. So important. So you may ask yourself, what can you do about it? Well, here's some steps. This is called the 365-day rule, and this is pretty simple. This basically means that if you haven't used something in a year, or if you don't even know what it is when you look at it, just get rid of it. You don't need it. All right? Thank you. So you can do this today. When you leave here today, you can go home this afternoon, and a great place to start is in your kitchen. Start opening up those drawers and look in the kitchen and think, what is this stuff even? I don't even know what this thing does. And you can take some of those things and get rid of them and let them go. Right? And if you haven't used it in a year, let it go. It's just taking up space. That's all it's doing. It's not giving you any kind of satisfaction or giving you any real, I'll just leave it at that. So when you go through those drawers and you pick something up and you go, do I need this? Do I really need this? Yes or no? It's easy to answer yes, unless you're doing one thing, and that's being honest. And it's easy, well, maybe not easy, but it's good to be honest with other people, right? We all know that. But it's really difficult to be honest with ourselves a lot of the time. And so in that situation where I'm holding up this thing, maybe the thing that keeps my cilantro fresh or whatever it is, do I need this, yes or no? And if I'm being honest, and what I mean by being honest is looking at the things that really matter to me. What's really important to me? And does this, whatever it is, line up with that? If not, then let it go, right? You don't have to hold on to those things. I'm building a list here. I don't know if you noticed that. Okay, good. Digitizing. This is a great way to save space. Everything that we have that comes in, whether it's photos or bank statements or receipts, and we run our business out of our tiny house, by the way, too, so we live there and run a business out of it. 207 square feet, by the way. I think you know that. So from that space, we digitize all of that information, and what that allows us to do is free up space. We don't have a filing cabinet in our house anymore. That's all gone. So that's a great way to save some space. Rethinking shopping. Anybody like to shop? Oh, come on, this is Colorado Springs. Anybody like to shop? There's like 60 gazillion stores here. I know you guys like to shop. So the thing with shopping's fine. There's nothing wrong with shopping, but we have to rethink how we shop. And what I mean by that is we're kind of bombarded all the time in this society with we need the next best thing, right? We need to get that new iPhone. I don't even know we're on 15 or something. We need that new iPhone, right? You got to have the best and the newest of everything. Well, if you go out into the store, it's like going food shopping when you're hungry. It's a disaster. You buy everything. You're like, oh, yeah, that looks good. Ooh, I'll take one of those too. You don't need to do that. Go shopping with a list and buy what's on your list and then go home. It's amazing that one little difference, how that will make changes in how you start sticking things into your space. Because what happens is space is a vacuum, right? And if you have space, you're going to fill it. That's just how life goes. So you can avoid some of that stuff by thinking when you're shopping. Eliminating debt. Anyone ever worry about debt? And I don't want to call you. You don't have to say how much it is. I'm not going to ask you that. Anyone, college student loans or mortgage or car payments or credit card debt, right? That can start to weigh on us over time, and it does weigh on us, and it gets heavy, and it's hard to get out from underneath, and it's hard to enjoy the moment when that's around. So do whatever you can right now when you go home to start chipping away at that debt. Because you'll find that when you create financial freedom, all other kinds of freedoms start to show up as well, and all kinds of spaces opened up, mostly emotionally. Creating goals. I just want to say one thing about goals. If I have a long-term goal, my short-term actions are going to be influenced by that. So if I have a goal to retire in 5 years, I may not go shopping and buy all this stuff that I don't really need, right? Because what happens is a long-term goal will almost always trump a short-term satisfaction. That's just how it is. Prioritizing joy. This, to me, is the most important thing out here. If I live my life from a place of joy, of happiness, I bring that to the world around me, that influences the people around me, my family, my friends, people I don't really know, right? And things open up for myself as well. Just as I can be weighed down by debt and frustration, I can be lifted up by joy. Getting Zen. That's kind of stealing a word, but the idea with Zen is to simplify and let go. It's very simple. Okay, so we hang on to things sometimes because we think they're important, when really what's important is what's inside. So anything you do here is a choice. So you can choose to be honest when you're looking through your stuff. You can choose to prioritize joy. You can make these choices, and I hope that you do. Because in all the studies I've ever seen, there's never been someone on their deathbed who said, I wish I had a bigger house and I worked harder. It's not what they say. They say they wish they had the simple things in life. They wish they had more love and connection with family. That's what really matters. And that's what I hope for you, that you can start choosing these things in your day-to-day life, simplifying and creating joy this day and every day moving forward. Thanks for coming out.